Hello, welcome, beautiful souls. This is Debbie with Light Up Your Worth. I am having such a magical day today, and part of that magic is the people that I am so blessed to be able to call my friends and that I'm going to be introducing you to. And so, my friend today that I'm going to be bringing into your world is Cooper. And Cooper is really this magical unicorn that I have connected with through a coaching program. And I was trying to figure out how I was going to describe her, but really she's a magical unicorn because she just has these vibes that just sink into your soul and you just want to laugh and pick up and dance and play. And so without further ado, Cooper, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I love being described as a magical unicorn. More of
Yes.
that.
Yeah, I think we need more magic, right?
Yes.
And
And unicorns.
and unicorns, two of my favorite things.
Yes.
So I'm so excited that we were able to connect through our the same coaching program, and it has really been such a delight finding more of my peeps. And as I thought about launching this podcast and the membership, I was really looking to provide like this really safe, like non-judgmental place for people to come through and find a community where they feel loved and accepted and can kind of do their own exploration, feeling like they can say magical unicorn and people are like, oh, I get it. Not like, oh, magical unicorn. Yeah, that's sweet. But actually really get the deeper meaning behind all the magic, and that unicorns really do bring a lot of magic to the world. But and so I really wanted to hear more about how you started down this journey, this spiritual journey, and just your whole experience. So I'm just gonna pause and I'm going to take a breath and let you jump in.
Great question. Well, yeah, my story is a long and winding road, as I'm sure many people's spiritual stories are. Essentially, I grew up I was always a seeker, kind of. I always was interested in God, or, I knew there was something bigger out there. And my parents actually didn't baptize me when I was born. They waited. And my dad said, we want her to choose. And at 11, I was like, yes, I'm all in. Sign me up. I was raised a Methodist. I love the Methodist church. I especially loved the singing and the songs and the fellowship. It was just a really great experience. And then I ended up, through a whole series of events. I lived in the Midwest for a while. I was originally raised in Tacoma, Washington, and then moved to the Midwest and got pretty into evangelical Christianity. And like, I'm one of the only people I know who during spring break in college went to Daytona Beach to convert souls on the beach, like, not to party. My party was for Jesus,
Right on.
And yeah, I was super into it. And then I had a moment where I just kind of lost my religion. Basically, I was really I was into in college. I was into pretty much my whole life revolved around church. It was like every day, even though I was in college, it was like, Bible study or fellowship or, youth group. And I had a moment. My mom ended up having a relationship with a woman at a certain point. And she's a massage therapist. And she said that, she was working on a lot of cancer patients at the time. And she said, she would see so many women that had mastectomies and stuff. And she just saw bodies as like bodies of light. Like, it didn't matter if they were male or female. It was just like bodies of light. My mom's a little woo. And
Love it.
so yeah. And so she didn't see she was like, I'm gonna fall in love with whoever I'm gonna fall in love with, whether it's a man or a woman. It didn't seem to matter to her. I guess what we'd call it now is gender fluid, but back then I don't know if there was a word for it. And I remember some of my friends through the church in college were basically telling me my mom was going to go to hell and this and that. And I just had this moment where it's literally like, actually I have a very sort of biblical metaphor, when like Saul's on the road to Damascus and then like says the scales fall from his eyes and he becomes Paul the apostle. I kind of had a moment like that, but in reverse, where I was like, the scales fell from my eyes and I was like, Oh, that's total BS. Like, sorry, my mom is the sweetest, one of the most spiritual and sweet people. I don't believe she's going to hell for loving a woman. I can't do this anymore. And I don't know, it was like I just suddenly saw the truth and I couldn't subscribe to that philosophy any longer. And then I kind of just, you know, followed the path of rock and roll. I moved to LA and joined a rock band, and it's actually a punk rock band, and we toured all over, and that became my whole life. I married the guitarist, and we had a blast. Like, we just like toured all over the country and had a lot of success, had a lot of great things going for us. It became our living. We had songs placed on TV and got to go on some bigger tours. And then the band blew up. The band blew up. Whole bunch of crazy stuff happened, and essentially, the band fell apart, and that had been my whole life, pretty much through my 20s. The marriage fell apart, and I just found myself in this really dark spot. I also didn't have like a place to live. Like, I had to go back and live with my dad at the age of 30, which was uh
Oh.
I felt like such a loser, and and I remember I didn't know what to do. I kind of fell into this dark place. I fell into a deep depression, and I had never been a person to use, hard drugs or anything before. And suddenly I was like, just, making a lot of poor decisions in retrospect, but using a lot of substances, just in a bad spot. And I actually had a moment where I ended up really hurting myself physically. I overstimulated my heart, and I went to the hospital, and I remember the doctor said, "You have to stop. You have to stop doing drugs." And I was like, "I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go do drugs right after this, right?" And and I just didn't care. And then my mom, I don't know, I never told my parents what was going on with me, and they live far enough away to where I think I was pretty good at hiding what was going on with me. But my mom must have sent something, because she actually, this is a cool story. She had bought a house in Missouri back when I had to move to the Midwest, and she called it my house because the people who sold it to her, their last name was Cooper, and she closed on it on my birthday. So anyway, fast forward to this point in my life, however many years, 15 years later or whatever it was, she had sold, quote unquote, my house, and she had all this money from selling the house. And one of the things she wanted to do with the money was take me on an Abraham Hicks cruise. And I was like, I didn't know who Abraham Hicks was. And my mom was like, well, it's this woman, and she channels these like ancient spirits. And I was like, oh, heck no. Like, I am not about all that. What is this craziness? And then, but I did want to go on a cruise. And so we kind of made a deal. Like, I only had to go to one Abraham Hicks, lecture or whatever at the cruise. And then I was good. Like, I didn't have to do any more than that. And so this was pretty much right after, oh, like a couple of weeks or so after I overstimulated my heart. So it was pretty soon after. And we went, and I went to the first Abraham Hicks event. The auditorium in the cruise ship was filling up, and there was this really, like, I thought it was over the top happy song, if you want it, you can have it when you get out of the way. I was like, oh, brother, I don't know about these people. And then, Jerry Hicks at the time, he was still alive. He came out and gave an introduction, and then Esther came out, and, uh, they had this fun banter, and then Abraham came out, and holy smokes. So at this point, I was 33 years old. I heard Abraham's message, and it was like I had lived completely unconsciously. Even though I had been a spiritual seeker, I was not conscious, what I figured out, until I heard Abraham Hicks speak. And the reason why is because Abraham, their whole message is, you can create whatever life you want to create. You can be intentional and have the life you want. And that idea was revolutionary to me. And I think that's where the depression and the substance abuse and things came in for me, was because I felt no hope at the time when I was going through those things. And Abraham gave me hope, because I was like, oh, I have all the power inside of me. What? never had that ever crossed my mind that I could consciously create my life. It's crazy to me now. But yeah, so that was my introductory experience. And then from there, it was pretty much, I just absorbed as much Abraham Hicks teachings as I could. And that set me on the path of really pursuing spirituality and self-actualization. And I've been pretty much studying nonstop ever since, just trying to expand more as a human and as a soul ever since that moment. So that's how
Oh,
that happened.
oh my gosh. Like,
Yeah.
that is so remarkable. I have heard, I have another really good friend, and she was on an episode earlier, and her name is Elora. And Elora talks about, she goes on the same cruise.
Really?
Yes. And 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 how long she's been doing it, right? Like, that is part of her, was part of her path, was also is this cruise that she goes on, really, right? To get this feeling of her soul connection with people who speak the same language, who understand. And since she has done that, how her life looks now versus where it was then. It's pretty
Oh
phenomenal.
my gosh.
Like,
Yeah. Mine too. My life was so small when I was in that dark place. It was so small, down to like just the people I would even like interact with, my mindset, everything was so small. And once I discovered Abraham, it was like, wow, it just like everything. Now my life is so big and so far beyond what I even thought was possible for myself. That's what's crazy is like, I didn't even see, like, I didn't ever think that I could be a homeowner, right? Like, this is a small thing, but I remember when my husband and I bought our first house, I was like, I can't believe this. Cause like in my life, if before I met Abraham, I never would have thought I would ever have been able to buy a house. That's like a weird, small, limiting belief. Like, why couldn't I buy a house? I don't know. I didn't think I was capable of that, simple stuff like that.
oh
Yeah.
my gosh. And now
So,
look at you. Like, was starting to listen to your podcast, right? Becoming Infinite. And we
yeah.
were chatting about, like, how beautiful and how, like, you just have this natural creativity that is like flowing through you, and it's so expansive. Like, you almost, it's like when you're around something that's warm, you just want to get warmer, right? Like, oh, I want to put my hand up and feel this, like, this sparkliness that is coming through feeling and really believing that it is possible. And what a gift that your mom was able
Oh,
to feel and know at some really intuitive level that where you were, without you ever really having to share and put that in your life,
yeah.
knowing that you're a
Yeah.
seeker. Mhm.
Yeah, she's definitely a sparkly self, but in a different way, I would say, than me. And what's interesting is I actually raised by my dad. They divorced when I was 5. Although it's weird because now they live like next door to each other. They're best friends, but they're not married and they haven't been for a long time. But I was actually raised by my dad. So I was raised in a very masculine energy. I'm also, if you're an astrology person, I'm Leo sun, Leo moon, Capricorn rising. I got a lot of like masculine yang energy going on. And I think that I didn't spend much time with my mom actually until I had to move to Missouri with her as a teenager. And I lived there with her briefly. And I always kind of considered my mom, we didn't have that closeness that, most mothers and daughters have. She always seemed like this kind of out there woman to me because, she's in an African marimba band. She's a massage therapist. She has a lot of feminine energy, right? And
Mhm.
that seemed so foreign to me. And I think that my spiritual awakening, and it's so appropriate that it came at her hands in a way, is that has been a journey to activate the divine feminine within myself and to accept that energy. And I think that that was part of the issue, when everything blew up, my band, my marriage, and everything at the end of my 20s there, was that I was so in the masculine push, push, push. make it all happen. And the universe is like, nope, everything's going to blow up now. You can't push your way to this. You need to like slow down, get centered, be, get to the point where you're ready to receive. And it's not going to happen with this very masculine way that you're living your life now.
Hmm.
And so that's what this whole journey has been, sort of a journey to the feminine.
Oh, I love that. One of the areas that I've been really exploring really recently is the manifestation, but that we can only, like, for us to manifest our is based upon our own worth, our own belief, and more of a sustainable feminine version of it. Not that we don't go and get stuff done, right? Like, can't just sit here, but that balance of the receiving, the giving, and then really in a sustainable way of how we create. And once we are really owning our own worth, then the universe is like, okay, got it. Bam, there you go, right? And it's this beautiful dance of, I think we can have things come to us. And I think just like your experience, it comes in and then it's not sustainable. It goes. And I have noticed that too on my journey, right? Like these ups and these downs. And now it just feels so much more expansive. And you've
Yes.
experienced the same thing. Like,
Yeah, definitely. And I think that one of the things that makes it so different now is, do I get down? Sure. Is every day like, haha, yay, dance party? No, I'm a human being. Like,
yeah.
hello. There are some hard days. But the difference in my life now is I have my tools, I have my practices, and those things keep me, I don't want to say afloat, but they keep me centered and grounded in my divine nature in a way, so that the ups and downs of a human being don't completely spin me out or rock my world necessarily, and that I can get into back into alignment. I know how to do that now, whereas before I had no idea how to do that. I remember it during that time when everything was spinning out of control, just feeling like I was being sucked into a black hole, and I could feel the energy that was like dark, and I couldn't figure out how to bust out of it. I knew I could feel it, but I didn't know how to change. Whereas now I'd be like, oh, first of all, I probably wouldn't end up in that spot again, but now I know exactly how to change it. So that's the
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah. So if somebody is, maybe somebody listening now is feeling a little hopeless and they've just somehow found us right here chatting,
Yeah.
which we know that synchronicity is divine intervention, just like your
Yeah.
cruise was, and your
Yeah.
mom, which just happened to be the person, the vehicle, right, to bring it together. And so if somebody is new and they are, they've stumbled upon here and they're at the beginning more of their journey, you know what, from what you've learned in your journey, what would you guide them to do or to begin or
Yeah, I mean, I have, so everyone who works with me, the for where we start is they need to have a morning routine. They need to have, that's what, if you work with me, that's one of the contracts, that's one of the parts of it, is that it's really important to do something for your mind, your body, and your soul every day. And with consistency, that is going to change your life. And so that can look, the great thing about it is we don't all have to do the same thing. I mean, maybe for your mind, you like to journal, or maybe you like to like do mirror work. That's another, mirror work's amazing. We'll talk about that in a second. Or do affirmations. Maybe for your soul, you like to meditate. I'm a TM person. I love my TM, right? Maybe you like to do Kundalini yoga. Maybe you like to do breathwork. Or just sit in silence. So you can pick. There's a smorgasbord, right? For your
mhm,
body, maybe it's yoga, maybe it's stretching, maybe it's a workout, but you need to do those three things every single day. And it doesn't have to be long, it can be 10 or 20 minutes, but that will change your life. So if I had to say anything to someone, that's what I would say. I would say commit to 40 days of a morning practice every single day and watch what happens for sure.
I love that. This year I tried something new. I went to the app Happier. I had a friend text me and say, "Hey, I'm going to go try." No, sorry, not Happier. I love that one too, but 10% for the meditation. She was doing like they did a new challenge for the beginning of the year, right? For I forgot 21-day challenge, I think it was. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I've tried it before, but I haven't been so consistent. And it was probably the big thing that I changed this year is I actually do spend those first, sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes I'm able to do it for 30 minutes, right? Depending on my morning. And you know what? And you know, we all hear the numbers about how great it is, but wow, it really has made a huge difference in changing those neural
Yeah.
pathways of my brain on the franticness, even when I've overslept and I just take 5 minutes to ground myself back down and set out my intention. I don't leave the house feeling like, oh my gosh, this day is going to get away from me. I also actually do some energy work and saying I'm going to bend time so that I'm not late. But, you know, that's another story. But
Einstein time. I know about it.
so I'm really interested too. You had talked up, like you were like, oh, mirror work.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I want to specify the morning routine is before we check our phones, before we check Facebook or Instagram. Like the only acceptable reason to check your phone before you start is to set up insight timers so you can get the little points for practicing that day. That's
yeah.
the only yeah, because that's the other thing is so many people will immediately go on Facebook and go down the rabbit hole and get spun out for the whole day. And even if you try to come back to your morning practice at that point, you're already spun out. And what you're telling the universe is everyone else is more important than you. And so that's the other deal we make is do the morning practice before you check anything online. Yeah, for sure.
I love
And
that.
then mirror work.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, it's so important. And then you're telling the universe, hey, I'm the most important thing. And the universe is gonna show up for you like that. Yeah.
I love that. You are telling the universe that you are more important than others, or that they're more
Yeah.
important,
Well,
depending
you're
on what
you're just the
direction
most
you're putting.
important thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like, and making that decision is something as simple as what do you do when you first wake up? Are you checking the phone, more concerned about what's out there versus in here?
Yeah.
That is that's a gem. I mean,
Yeah. It's a
and
good one,
it
and it will
it's
change your
super great.
life
Yeah.
for
And,
sure.
you know, when I've talked to people too about, you know, like, oh, and I used to believe this myself, like, oh no, I value myself. And then I would have somebody like challenge that, and it would be something even as small as picking up your phone and what are you doing when you first check? Are you checking out there versus here? And how it all these little things actually show it's not what we say or even how we feel, but what are our behaviors? Are they in alignment with what we're really trying to do? And so I loved how you highlighted that. And so now I want to hear about your this mirror work that you're doing because I've done some, and so I'd
Oh,
love
yeah.
to have you.
This is another powerful, tool for building self-love, building self-worth, and that is you get your mirror, or if you don't have a mirror, you get your phone and turn the camera around so you're looking at yourself, and then you just speak to yourself the way you would want like a lover or someone to speak to you. I love you. I love you. You are so amazing. You're incredible. God, you're beautiful. Oh, I'm amazed by you. Just tell yourself beautiful things that you would want someone to say to you, but that we don't ever, like a lot of times when we talk to ourselves, we say terrible things to ourselves that we would never say to someone we loved, you
Yeah,
know?
right.
And yeah. And so just doing that briefly in the morning, every time, actually, I do it every time I pass a mirror. I'm like, I love you, Cooper. You're amazing. I'm so proud of you. Wow. You're just like doing such good stuff. I can't believe all the cool stuff you're doing. Just talking to yourself like that, you start to feel pretty good about yourself, and it really does change your energy, and you learn to talk to yourself nicely and with love instead of beating yourself up for things like we all have done and do sometimes, but it changes that.
Mhm. I love how you do that no matter where you go, not just, first thing in the
Oh
morning.
yeah.
Because I have some affirmations on my window, I mean, on my window, in the mirror in the bathroom, right, that I read every time I'm in there. I drink a lot of water, so I'm in there frequently, and I see this and bright, right? Like, I can't help it, and it's been amazing how at some point, I know I'll switch them out because I have before. It's when it's really worked its way through my subconscious and really changed my neural pathways to like, no, that is, I am, whatever it is
Mm,
I'm working on. I don't want to share it today, but
yeah.
but it is so, so powerful of the mirror work. I remember
Yeah.
using it even for and I think I discovered this. I think originally it was Louise Hay that I got the idea of the mirror work, right? And for myself.
Yeah.
And I remember doing it when I was working on my body image. Whew.
Yes. Yeah.
And that the feeling the first time you really look yourself in the eyes.
It's
Wow.
very emotional. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, the feeling that comes over you. And sometimes I've been doing it for so long, I might forget how I was talking with somebody recently and they had never done it and they did it and they were crying. And it's such a tender moment to actually see yourself.
Yes, it is. When you really look into your eyes, I mean, that is always an emotional moment, for me. I'm like, whoa. It's a little like
Yeah,
intense to meet
the
yourself.
the the depth. And I remember when I used to live out in Colorado for like 3 years, and I went there. I didn't know I lived up next to Boulder, Colorado, and I
Mm,
didn't realize then, but I went there to heal from my first relationship, and um, that had ended, and it didn't always go so great, in this relationship. So there was a lot of healing to go. So of course I went to Boulder, another vortex of like superpower energy there.
mm.
And I went there, and that was when I really started to do some of the mirror work, and that feeling of, oh my god, like that connection. So at first, when I would look at people too, I was doing that, right? That connection with them, and it would freak
Yeah.
people out because you could,
Yeah.
and it would then you freak yourself out. You're like, oh my gosh, what did I just see, right? Like,
Well, I think especially in our society now, everyone spends so much time with their heads down in their phones. It's actually very rare to have someone be dropped in and completely present with you. And when they are, it can be uncomfortable for some people, but it can also be. I have someone in mind who he passed on. I think it was last year, but he's one of those people that every time you were with him, it was just he was 100% present with you, and it's just such a cool feeling to feel like someone's actually seeing you and present with you because it's very rare in our society. Yeah.
yeah, to be seen. Oh,
Yes.
and really feel
Yeah.
that connection. Oh, that's what's so been so what's the word I'm looking for? Is, I don't know, it's almost surreal, like the draw when I was first reaching out and we were connecting. Right? Like I just knew without knowing, really just paying attention to um, who was I feeling called to really connect with, and who, not that I don't want to connect with, but I like a natural progression of how it will flow, and trusting that and learning how to trust it and knowing that everything is happening as it is because it's not our timelines, and the beauty of it all. So now I want to know more about your program Ascend
Yeah.
and what
So
that's
people
all about.
can book one-to-one sessions with me. I do that. The beauty about some of the practices that I practice is that a lot can be worked through in just one session through things like NLP and hypnosis. But my Ascend program is a 6-week program, and we just dive really deep into reprogramming our subconscious limiting beliefs. Basically from the time we're 1 to 7, we're walking subconscious brains and we're just soaking up all the programs that are being put into us. And some of those can be helpful and many of them cannot be helpful. And then we grow up with these programs running, and if we don't uh, basically retrain our brains, rewire our brains, we'll just be living those programs over and over through no fault of our own, really. I mean, we can't help how our parents raised us, and I'm not blaming the parents. I'm just saying we all have
Yeah.
it. And so it's just really important to dive deep into uncovering unhelpful programs that we are running in our lives, and reprogramming the brain so that we are running more helpful programs, I guess. And so the cool thing about it is it can work for people who are working on wanting a better relationship. It can work for people who are feeling like they're kind of stuck in their business and they have all sorts of limiting beliefs about success or about money. It can work for a lot of different people. I tend to work with women because that's my big passion, is women's empowerment and empowering women. But it's interesting. Recently, I've been getting a lot of men clients, so I don't know what's going on there. I guess maybe it just works for everyone. I know you're supposed to have a niche, but I tried to have a niche and then people keep coming to me who aren't the niche. So I don't know. Maybe I need to re-examine that. Yeah.
You're just such a bright light that it's just shining and people are like, oh, they're just drawn to it, and I think, maybe people will get it when they're listening to it, but I think when they see you, especially, they're gonna, like, you have this magnetism, of that
Mm.
sparkly unicorn magnetism, where you're just like, ooh, like, I want some of that glitter and shine, and like, come over
Well,
here and sparkle
everyone
at me.
Everyone could have it. It's really just all the internal positioning work and practices that I do. And that's what I teach my clients. That's what we do. That's the work that we do together, and it starts with the morning routine.
Yeah.
So there's no secret. That's really it, it's just doing all the internal work and excavating the unhelpful programs and then rewiring it with helpful programs.
hmm
So,
I
yeah.
think that's what's so beautiful about, like, the whole spiritual realm, metaphysics, holistic, woo. I heard somebody call it new age, like, mystical, is that there's so many options, right? There's so many magical things to pick out and put in our own individual carts about what really super resonates with us. And then others, you're like, well, that's beautiful, but it's not really my thing, right? Like, oh, that's not my genius. But I know somebody whose genius that is. And what I find myself so blessed with is that in this 20-year journey, I have been blessed with so many people who have so many different geniuses and how they blend. Like, we don't all, none of us, I think, identify with, I'm one thing. This is this is the one thing, right? Like, all I do is, breath work. All I do is hypnotherapist. It's like, we blend in, and I keep using the analogy of the crock pot too, right? Like, we all throw in our different things that are really us, and then it creates this beautiful thing. And I think when people are first starting, they get caught up on a title of something. Like, oh,
Mm.
you do what? Like Reiki, right? I call Reiki our gateway drug into spirituality. And I love that, right? Like that, and I love Reiki. I am a Reiki master, and so many of us, that was our first introduction of it, but I have found it rarer and rarer that that's the only thing that somebody does. Is that, I
Yeah.
think it used to be, right? Well, I think 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe even the 90s, where that was the big, and now it's integrated and pulled in with all the shifts in the energy in the universe into
Yeah.
adding to it, and how they all just kind of fit together like a different p- puzzle for everybody.
Absolutely. I think our whole society has changed in that way. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, when I was growing up, it was like you're going to go to school and become a doctor or become a lawyer because they make money, you know? And I
Mhm.
didn't, I didn't even have a concept of like all the things that I could have possibly done with my life because it wasn't really an option. And no one really talked about it. It was like, you go to school, you get your degree, and then you do this thing for your whole life. And then maybe you retire one day. And certainly that's true in the spiritual realm too. And I think that what I think is cool is that the way our society has changed, and now there's, even in your job, you might do lots of different things, and people have lots of different jobs. It's no longer like 50 years with the same company or whatever. You know,
Mhm.
people throughout their life, they have a lot of different jobs. But I think it's really cool for spirituality because I think it allows it to be more holistic. That I'm really big on integrating practices for the mind, the body, and the spirit. And I think that each practice, like Reiki is great, but it's also really important to address the other parts because that's the way that you're going to get the most healing. Yeah, for sure. So
Mhm.
that's why I do it all. That's why I love my breath work. I do get into the mystical. I mean, it depends if my clients are open for it. If they're not, some people just are like astrology, I don't buy it, and then I don't use that with them, but I love reading natal charts for my clients. Like that really helps me know exactly how to help them. So there's the mystical aspect of it. There's the body with the breath work. There is the soul with the meditation. I just like bringing it all in there, and I think you get bigger transformations when you operate that way for sure.
I love that. I
Yeah.
really like that. Really resonates. It's like the whole person, all
Yeah.
aspects of them. And, we can go do a deep dive in one, and then sometimes we forget about the other. And I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, anybody who was into the whole spiritual thing was more like these hippies, right? Like, and they really were focused, at least my exposure to it. I grew up in California, and, so I mean, we used to go to
Yeah.
Santa Cruz and go lay on the beach. We weren't really into the, like tie-dye seemed hippie to me, right? Like that was spiritual. If you wore tie-dye, you were spiritual, right? And they just
Yeah.
didn't, they didn't shave their legs or their underarms. Like that was spiritual, like from where I grew up in the 70s. And so, and there was them and there was us regular people, right? Like, and now it is like you've just seen this integration into you can be all things are
Mm,
possible, and we can all grow. And I love how you approach it with all aspects of who people are. So it's got to be
yeah.
less scary for people, like who are like curious and
Yeah. And I have some people that are like just I like I said, it's like I have what I thought was my niche, but then other people keep coming to me that are like not like I do have some clients that I would say are not like super open to a lot of the spiritual stuff, and that's fine. Then we just work more with the more quote unquote practical tools. We can do that.
hmm
But if you're open to it, addressing the whole picture just I feel like gives you so much more transformation in such a short period of time. It's
yeah.
so funny because what you were saying about the hippies, I think that's the thing. I think that's why my mom, why we didn't necessarily connect as when I was a kid, because she was like that. She lived in like the house, the massage therapy house when she when she was
hmm
in Seattle, and she wore tie dye, and she had that hippie vibe. She was into Reiki. She took me to walk when I was a kid because I had some muscular issues, and so she was always into all of that alternative stuff. And I just it seems so out there to me, which is like weird. I was a kid. What, like, it shouldn't have seemed out there. And now I'm like, dang, my mom was cool.
She
She
was
was like
really cool.
way more evolved. Yeah. Oh, so crazy.
It is, right?
Yeah.
Even alternative, right? I remember finding, I don't know, maybe it was the late 1990s, acupuncture, and nobody I knew had tried
Yes.
acupuncture. And now I'm like, I go, every couple weeks. I just get like, I call it the little tune up, right? She does this cupping, and she's basically just moving my energy around so it doesn't get stagnant, right?
Yes.
So that I don't get sick. So I don't, that it's
Yeah.
just all
Acupuncture is
flow. Like, it's just so
it's
beautiful.
magic. So we when years ago when we was in the first band with the first husband, and we had a situation. He fell asleep with like one of those terry cloth armbands on his right, no, it was his left arm because it was the arm that you fret with. And he woke up and the arm was completely numb and it cut off his circulation. And we were supposed to leave tour in like 2 weeks. And we went to every sports medicine doctor, every specialist, this and that. And, they do various things. Nothing was working. We went and saw an acupuncturist in Venice. And within a session, he could play again. A couple sessions later, he was completely fine. But no other doctor could help him. So I'm a big fan of acupuncture.
Yeah, right. And I don't know about you, but it seems like now where I'm at now in my journey is that I can see how it's all the same and it's all different at the same time. Like all of this
Yes.
universal energy and the practicality of how it shows up, whether it's acupuncture, even the cupping, right? Of like bringing
Yeah.
the all of that blood flow up and really getting in there and they're almost like I feel like these trophies on my back, right? When you can
Yeah.
tell, like,
Yeah.
oh man, there was some stuff stuck there, and then how it flows into the breath work and traditional tools with coaching because that is part of the brain too. And
Absolutely.
I love this. I just have it's just so fascinating and I'm so glad that I was able to share it with you and that you're sharing, just a small
Yes.
sliver of your magical, mystical essence. And so if people are interested in learning more and connecting with you, Cooper, how would you suggest that they do that? How should they reach
Yeah,
out to
thank
you?
you for asking. Yeah, there's a couple different ways. So I have a website, coopergillespie.com. And also my Instagram. I love my Instagram. That's a great place to hang me. And it's Cooper Gillespie. And I also have my podcast, Becoming Infinite. So you can find me in any of those places. And I'd love to, I'd love to be in your orbit with you.
I love that. So you can also look for her. I think we're talking about having you join me in the membership and, host a
Yes.
really small thing in the membership. So if somebody's interested in joining that as well, that, know that the magical, uh, mystical, really, I'll call you your mystical, you're a mystical woman. Cooper will somehow will be integrated into that. And feel free to reach out to her. We'll put all this stuff in the show notes too, so that it's easy for you guys to find her. So thank you so much. This has been such
Thank
a
you.
delightful conversation. So take care.
It has.
Okay.
Thank you. You too.